Thanks for joining us for another episode of Capital City News, your connection to Salt Lake City government. I'm your host, Poonam Kumar, and today I'm at the Salt Lake City Cemetery, which is the largest municipal cemetery in the nation. And I'm hanging out, I'm enjoying the beautiful scenery, and trying my hardest not to scare my new friends behind me. On this week's episode of Capital City News, we hear from Salt Lake City Council Chair Erin Mendenhall about the inland port, and our History Minute is about the Peery Hotel. Let's get started with our legislative update and look back.
At its October 16th meeting, the City Council adopted an ordinance to allow accessory dwelling units to operate across the city, as well as a resolution allocating funding for the capital improvement program.
Over 1,100 volunteers, 106 service providers, and nearly 900 individuals who are experiencing or at risk of experiencing homelessness participated in the second annual Project Homeless Connect. The one-day, one-stop event brought together community volunteers to provide services to those in need in Salt Lake City. Participants who attended were connected to a variety of services ranging from housing, medical and dental care, employment assistance, haircuts, pet care, legal services, and more. Over 2,500 lunches were provided, along with next step support and care needed to move forward. Longtime community activists Archie and Lois Archuleta were honored with the Key to the City Award. Mayor Biskupski recognized the two for their years of volunteerism, activism, and advocacy with local organizations such as Utah Coalition of La Raza, Head Start, Crossroads Urban Center, Centro Civico, and many more. The Archuletas will be celebrating their 60th anniversary and 60 years of service this November. Inland port has been a hot topic of discussion this last several months. Salt Lake City Council Chair Erin Mendenhall gives us an overview.
The inland port is an area where customs takes place for goods coming into the country and goods intending to leave the country. Right now we have ports on the coast, which many people know about, and we don't have many inland that are west of the Mississippi. There's a lot of backlog in the coastal ports of ships waiting to come in and unload their goods. And one way to expedite and streamline that system of imports is to have another area where they can do that unloading of the cargo. By the creation of an inland port, which would be a federal designation, ships would be able to put those loads onto very long trains that would come into an area such as we're contemplating in Salt Lake City. And it would be an area for distribution to take place to the entire region, and also an opportunity for the region's goods to then get on those trains that go back to the coast and be exported to the rest of the world. Salt Lake City and the state of Utah have been talking about the creation of a port for years, actually. But the reality is that neither the city nor the state owns the property where the port is likely to go. That's owned by private property owners, and it will probably continue to be so. So the port creation isn't entirely in our hands. In fact, it's not in our hands very much at all any longer, since the state enacted some legislation that created an Inland Port Authority Board to oversee much of the development of the port. So there was a bill passed near the end of the legislative session during 2018 that created the Inland Port Authority Board and gave them sweeping authority that in many ways placed the burden of development, the cost for development, particularly around infrastructure, police and fire, and other normal city functions, on our taxpayers without any assurance that we would reap the benefits of the growth in that area. The city saw that the state was happy to move ahead with those plans. We were receiving communications from the governor and others that they were ready to enable that board to do those things. And we seized an opportunity to negotiate a better outcome for our residents. That happened with the result in a special session that gave us greater assurances from an environmental, tax increment, and many other standpoints that the city would be made whole in this process and not be violated the way that we believe we would have with the prior bill. The process that the City Council undertook in negotiating with the state for a different outcome resulted still in many question marks, and we wanted to explore those more deeply with the community and with technical experts in those areas. And so the City Council held a series of fact-finding nights, 3 of them, and public hearing to receive input from economic, air quality, community groups, and so forth about how they perceive the impacts and the opportunities of this legislation. We know that this isn't the end of the conversation with the state by any means. And the state has been open about anticipating multiple pieces of legislation, probably for years to come, to amend and tweak the port as it develops. So the City Council very much wants to be at the crux of those conversations with all of the stakeholders, which of course includes many bodies and entities outside of the legislature. And we succeeded in, I think, holding those conversations. The result will be a report that will come out of the fact-finding nights that we will use for our own information, for public information, and we will offer it to the Inland Port Authority Board for their own information and consideration. But as a city entity, we will be impacted by and hopefully have some impact on the development of the port. And in order to have an impact there and to ensure that we are impacted in the most positive ways possible, we have to have good lines of communication and a respectful dialogue with the Inland Port Authority. And that's something the City Council has worked hard to create and maintain, and will continue to be at that conversation on behalf of our taxpayers and residents.
And now it's time for our History Minute.
The Peery Hotel on the corner of 3rd South and West Temple was built in 1910. The real estate market was booming in Salt Lake City at the time, and the owners refused an offer for their property of $100,000 and opted to build the hotel instead. With costs estimated of $120,000, it was designed to be a luxury hotel for those who'd found wealth in the mines of Utah, with perfect accommodations for them and their families. It opened on September 15, 1911. At 3 stories high, it boasted 95 rooms, a massive lobby, and was an example of prairie architecture. By the 1940s, it was billed as the only hotel in Salt Lake with air conditioning. In 1999, almost 90 years after its opening, the Peery Hotel was renovated into a more modern, luxury hotel, and it's been in continuous operation for more than 100 years and is very much a relic of the Old West. In 1913, just a couple of years after it opened its doors, a highwayman in a black hat and face mask came in and robbed the saloon with 2 pistols in hand. He made off with $50 and a diamond ring belonging to the bartender, and a posse of hotel guests armed themselves and chased him away, though they never found him. Some claim the building to be haunted, with reports of a woman moaning in the elevator and children heard playing in the halls.
Well, there you have it. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Capital City News. Join us next time to stay up to date on all the latest. For SLCtv, I'm Poonam Kumar, signing off from the Salt Lake City Cemetery.